If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it.
The Chris Paul watch. And I think it's fair to call it the Chris Paul watch because of what we heard from Adrian Wojnarowski. So speaking on NBA Countdown on Friday, Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN Insider, listed the Knicks as one of the teams who would be a contender to land Chris Paul if he hits free agency. Here's what Woj had to say.
There are teams that would like to see if they could stack up enough contracts to take on his $30 million for this season and keep him, perhaps even flip him at the trade deadline. There are other teams who would trade for him and treat it like a salary cap savings. They would not guarantee his contract before that June 28th deadline, and then he would become a free agent. And Greeny, if Chris Paul is out there as a free agent this summer, look at the two teams in LA, the Clippers and Lakers, the Knicks in New York, the Golden State Warriors. Those would all be potential destinations for Chris Paul, who would then sign a deal at a much lower number than the $30 million he's guaranteed in Phoenix if he stays there past that June 28th deadline.
So there you have it. Knicks, along with the Lakers, Clippers, and Warriors as one of the teams that would be a team to watch if Chris Paul indeed becomes a free agent. Now, the Suns are reportedly considering releasing Chris Paul. By Chris Haynes' report, they've already decided to release Chris Paul. Again, still confusion as to what exactly is going on in Phoenix with that. But they're considering releasing him before the June 28th deadline. That's when his $30 million salary for next season becomes fully guaranteed. The Suns could save up to $27 million this season by cutting and stretching the rest of his contract over 5 years. It could save $15 million by just cutting him just this season and just paying the rest of the $15 million. So we talked about this last week. We talked about how this could work, and I made the case that I could see why the Knicks would want to do this, and I don't understand it. Are you surprised at this point to not hear Woj suggesting that the Knicks are a contender indeed for Chris Paul, and do you buy it?
I'm not shocked because, again, as we noted on the previous podcast, there's a very strong relationship between Chris Paul and Leon Rose, and obviously CAA. So even if the Knicks weren't overly enthused about it or seriously considering it, just knowing that they're in the mix, that they're competing, helps drive up the price a little bit, generate the buzz. And, not that Chris Paul needs it. If Chris Paul becomes a free agent, plenty of teams in the NBA are going to be, searching for his services. But I will say, I think there's a greater likely. I thought there was very little likelihood last week. I think there's a little greater likelihood now, seeing the reports that he's willing to consider the taxpayers mid-level exception from teams like the Lakers or the Clippers or the Warriors, whoever that case might be. If he's not going to accept the big deal, because there are teams that would pay him, $20 million a year, for a couple seasons, maybe he's not going to get $100 million contract. But if he's willing to accept one of those, a mid-level exception for a year and kind of go year by year basis, etc., which is not outside the realm of possibility. Remember, this is a guy who's banked over $350 million in salary. He's been in the league for a long time now, 18-year career. That's not counting the
State Farm money he's got, because we see him every time out in the NBA Finals.
Exactly, and that's just the money.
Wearing those baggy shorts, and Jalen Rose shouting them out, saying, "I love those shorts." That's just the money Chris Paul has made in the NBA, not the money Cliff Paul has brought in. Via State Farm. So, yes. So listen, if he's willing to accept a reduced salary at this stage of his career, which isn't crazy, then I think the Knicks are in the mix. So do I think they're a favorite? Probably not. Again, I would assume he'd prefer an opportunity to start at point guard for the Lakers alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis and et cetera. I would assume he'd prefer an opportunity to start for the Clippers if he feels Kawhi is healthy and Paul George, et cetera. We'll see how he kind of feels about the Warriors. Of those opportunities, I would again, I'm just me assuming that coming off the bench behind Jalen Brunson wouldn't be at the top of his wish list. But again, there are other factors that go in there. Maybe he's always wanted to play in New York. Maybe his family wants to spend a year in Manhattan. Playing, being a backup is far less wear and tear on his body. Not only does that benefit the Knicks because him and
Brunson could each reduce each other's workloads. But maybe that's something that he appeals. Maybe he wants to play 4 more seasons, and he feels like the best way to do that is to start playing 18 minutes, 20 minutes a night off the bench. If Brunson goes down for 2 weeks, can he play 37 minutes a night? Of course he can, and he could average 10 assists per game during that stretch. Does he feel that he can play alongside Brunson for the final 5 minutes of a game? A lot of interesting aspects there, but I will say, and part of it's you're kind of convincing me a little bit last week that I think there's a bit of a glimmer of hope that it could make sense for both parties, and that they'll at least explore the opportunity.
I tell you what, when I saw this, because I made the case and I saw that I thought it could be a possibility given people understand kind of where the roles would lie. Right. I wasn't sure if I'd be convinced that either side would come to that agreement at this point. To hear Woj list the Knicks as one of these 4 teams along with the Warriors, Clippers, and Lakers makes me feel like Chris Paul is going to be a Knick, which sounds crazy to me because I never would have thought that even 4 days ago. But look at these teams, the Clippers and Lakers, 2 very old 2 teams with a lot of guys who are also injury prone, and teams where he will be going there to be a savior, much like he was going to be a savior with the Rockets, just like he was going to be a savior with the Clippers the first time, just like he was going to be a savior with the Suns. And I'm like, is he really? And now Chris Paul is a great player, but does he really want to put that on himself? I don't know. And then I look at the Warriors thing doesn't make any sense to me, really. I mean, you want to talk about playing behind a point guard. You know about Jalen Brunson, playing behind Steph Curry. I mean, I don't know how much time he's getting at all in playing against a guy who's going to play as many minutes as Steph, because there really isn't much of a justification to take Steph Curry out of the game if you have Chris Paul on your bench.
My guess would play Steph off the ball and then play Clay at 3. I don't know, but you're right.
Yeah, it's a very weird fit to me. I'm like, I don't really see that now. And then there's also, I don't know how much animosity there is, but I think of all the players the Warriors have faced over the last however many years, I don't think that Chris Paul is on the top of their, Christmas card list. Let's just say that. So I look at the Knicks and I see these relationships that are here with Leon. I see these relationships with Worldwide West. I think this is maybe the first instance, or at least the first high profile instance where those relationships may get the Knicks across the finish line, because besides LeBron James, he doesn't have a relationship with any of these other teams or people at all. He knows the Clipper organization, but they traded him. So I don't know how much that he would love to then go back to play with those guys who got rid of him kind of unceremoniously. So I think the Knicks have a really good shot to get him here. I'm torn about whether or not, just like I was torn last week, I'm torn this whether or not it's the right move. I see the positives. Again, I think he could play that Jason Kidd role. I think he'd be instrumental to not just helping a lot of these other guys in terms of getting these guys shots like Mitchell Robinson, Obi Toppin, and unlocking some of these guys on the Knicks. I think he'd be instrumental for these guards. I think he could help Jalen Brunson's game. I think he could help Emmanuel Quickley's game. Chris Paul is like a point guard whisperer. Every point guard he plays with plays the best they've ever played in their career. This goes back to Darren Collison in New Orleans. We saw it with Campaign. We saw it with Darren Collison. We've seen it with Eric Bledsoe. We've seen it with so many guards, young guys who go and play with Chris Paul. And I don't know if it's how he's teaching them or they just watching him play. They all get better. I think you see that.
Campaign was out of the NBA.
Right. He was a bust. This guy was a lottery pick. I mean, people forget how, I know he was kind of the first Murray State kind of guard that people were into before John Morant. And he was a bust, a complete bust, and a lottery pick. And he gets with Chris Paul, and all of a sudden he's helping the Suns go all the way to the NBA Finals. So I think the Knicks see the value in that. I think Chris Paul would see the value in that. I think he could say, look, I get there. I get to, get in the ear of Emmanuel Quickley, get in the ear of Jalen Brunson. All of a sudden, Mitchell Robinson may not be barking so much about not getting the ball if I'm there, because I'm a pass-first guard, unlike the guys the Knicks have right now. The fit is there. The question is the money. But once I saw Woj say he's willing to take way less than the $30 million, that was the sign out there to these people who think, oh, we're going to pay him $25 million, $20 million. If he's taking the mid-level exception, I think the Knicks have a really good shot here. Now, again, Can he stay healthy? I have no confidence that he can stay healthy. Because I think the problem with Chris Paul is, I think, because the Suns tried to keep him healthy this year. I think the problem is his body is so old that like the intensity of playoff basketball is different than like regular season basketball. So like if you're not playing with that kind of ferocity for long enough stretches in the season, I think trying to then turn it on in the playoffs gets you hurt. That's why I think he got hurt this year. So the Knicks will have to find some other way to get him healthy beyond just resting him. They gotta have to find something else. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's less minutes. I don't know. But that would be the major concern, because if he's not available for the playoffs, then what good is this? But if he's talking about just taking a mid-level exception, I don't know what really the harm is in terms of a risk factor. I don't think there is.
That's what if we're being serious about this, and I understand that they're clunky fit and how would it, but the reality is the Knicks don't have, other than trading in terms of free agents, in terms of salary, the ways to improve their team, not via trade, strictly via free agency this summer. They have the mid-level exception right around 12.5 million, and the 4.5 biannual exception to use.
Yeah.
The players they'd be considering, Torrey Craig, Dante DiVincenzo.
Yeah,
has been mentioned, but he probably might be priced out of that price range.
Right.
Alex Burks is somebody that they could bring back but now it sounds like the Pistons are going to exercise this option. I say that to say it's not as though they're passing up other great players.
Right.
In other words,
exactly.
the opportunity cost is limited. So if you can get a player like Chris Paul at a fraction of your total salary cap, I think it greatly improves your team. Again, as Woj mentioned, maybe keep him for half a season and trade him to another team. Maybe he does Leon Rose a favor and it takes a half a season playing limited action and then gets traded to another team at the deadline that needs a starting point guard, something along those lines. It's feasible. Again, a lot of moving parts here. We still don't know if the Suns are going to waive him. Even if they waive him, another team can claim him for a year, as Woj talked about, and then keep him as a trade chip at his current salary. So even before we get to the point where it becomes a free agent, when there's a lot of it's somewhat unlikely that even gets that stage. But I agree with you. The arrow was slowly creeping towards the Knicks being towards us seriously considering whether this is feasible, whether it's possible, and then at that point whether it's beneficial. But my point being that it's hard to argue against it vociferously because it costs so little.
Yeah, that's the thing, because the whole the big issue I would have had, and that's why I brought the Jason Kidd example, would have been trading assets away. I mean, there was that report that the Suns love Emmanuel Quickley. I'm like, that talk should end right there. There's no conversation regarding trading Emmanuel Quickley for Chris Paul. But Jason Kidd signed for, at that time, was the veterans minimum, I believe, to come to the Knicks at that point. And that's why they just added him to the team. They already had a point guard in Raymond Felton. Again, it was a very similar situation, and it worked out great. He just didn't play well in the playoffs.
Right.
So, and to me, also the reason why I really, again, the more I think about it, the more I see basketball-wise, I see a fit, is the Knicks, I thought in this postseason, were lacking some veteran leadership. Like I felt like when they beat up the Cavs in a team where both teams didn't have really veteran leadership.
Yep.
But like when they got to the Heat, it felt like there was some veteran savvy that was needed to close some of these games. Game 1, I think about. Game 6, those are the two games I think about where I'm like, or even game 4, I think 2, you could say. 3 games the Knicks could have won, and that shifts the entire series. Where you're like, just a veteran out there who knows, okay, don't get that charge or make that rotation, or he can get that steal, or doesn't make that turnover. Like they had a guy like that series just could flip one way or the other. And they were missing that guy. I didn't know if the Knicks would have an option to get a guy like that. It didn't seem like that was possible. But like thinking about Chris Paul and how he would be playing in those games against the Miami Heat, like I could see him making those kind of plays. I can see him being the difference in those games. So I saw that during those playoff games. Like, man, I really wish they had a guy. I don't know who that would be. Like again, watching Kyle Lowry just like charge his way to like the Knicks, screwing up these final games or making these deflections on RJ Barrett drives. And I'm just like, man, like Knicks don't have anybody like that. So seeing that and then seeing, I know Chris Paul, he's one of the smartest basketball minds playing right now. I know he watched that series and said, I could have been a difference there. So again, how much of it is different on the Clippers? I mean, he's got to be like Chris Paul, he's got to be Clippers Chris Paul in order to be a difference on the Clippers to me. Like they're a team that needs like a true point guard. That's why Russell Westbrook was so valuable to them, because even though he's the diminished player, he was able to play 35 minutes, 40 minutes, and like he's almost like a pitcher who like was giving them innings. Like it wasn't the most perfect inning. Sometimes they were terrible games sort of shooting he was playing, but he was playing 40 minutes and playing pretty hard and making plays. So it helped. Can Chris Paul give them that? Like, I don't think he's giving them that. Again, the Lakers, they're going to need him to be Clippers, Rockets, Chris Paul. Can he give them that? I don't think he can give them that. So I see the fit. We'll see how it goes. But I thought that was the first instance where I thought, okay, Chris Paul, he really might be a Knick. And it will be make for a lot of great talk, because I know a lot of people, when they heard that he was going to be a free agent, kind of dismissed the notion of Chris Paul being a Knick. I think that you cannot dismiss it at this point in time. So a story we will continue to follow all off season as long as it lasts. This whole Chris Paul sweepstakes, if it indeed starts, like Tommy said, because they still have to actually release him. And then the Suns were reportedly a team that may want to bring him back. So this has become a very bizarre scenario already, and it's only going to get more crazier, I think, as the summer continues. But let's get to another potential free agent who Knicks fans have had their eye on. And he's an unlikely name, Kristaps Porziņģis. He has a chance to opt out of his contract to become an unrestricted free agent this season. And despite how things ended in New York, some have wondered if he would fit well with the Knicks today. But SNY NBA insider Ian Begley says the chances for a KP reunion in New York seem unlikely. Begley writes today, the prospect of bringing Porziņģis back to New York on a long-term deal may look good on paper, but it would be a significant commitment for the Knicks, and it doesn't seem like a path they'd go down at this time. Porziņģis played 65 games this season for the Wizards. That was the most he had played since his second year with the Knicks, all the way back in, I believe, 2018. He posted a career high in field goal percentage and points per game this year with the Wizards. So, Tommy, you got Ian Begley there putting out there that the fit looks good on paper, at least, but that the Knicks may not be willing to make the significant long-term commitment that would to bring him here. So I'll ask you, are the Knicks wrong to pass up on a KP reunion?
Yeah, so there are a couple questions here. First and foremost, the only way the Knicks can obtain him is via a sign and trade.
Sign and trade, yeah.
Yeah, so he'd have to opt out or sign an extension with this team, and or opt out and then sign and trade.
Or I guess he could technically opt in and then the Knicks could trade for him then.
Sure, yes, that's true. He could opt into the final season, correct? And then
he won an extension after that. But yeah.
Correct. And my assumption is the Knicks wouldn't give up assets if they didn't have an extension. In other words, they wouldn't trade him for a 1-year rental, unless they felt like they were dumping a contract, which the Wizards wouldn't accept. So I don't think I would include RJ or Randall in a deal. So then you're asking yourself, would you do a Mitchell package, Mitchell and somebody, Mitchell and Fournier, Mitchell and a draft pick, something along those lines, kind of a Mitchell Robinson-centric package for Kristaps Porziņģis. If you're willing to entertain that, then the question you ask yourself is, okay, am I willing to pay Kristaps Porziņģis 25, 30, $35 million a season? And then what is KP going to require via an extension? So he has an option for 38.8 is his player. I'm sorry, 33.8 is his player option this season. If he declines it, it's unlikely that he'd get, the max he can get is basically 4 years, 180 million, which is the Wizards would be crazy to pay. I don't think anyone assumes that. I don't even think Porziņģis is going to request the max. But is 4 years at averaging 35 million annual salary? Is that something that KP would settle for? Is that something that the Knicks would be comfortable paying? So those are all the questions that kind of pay it. I have hesitancy. I think that it's very interesting. I think KP would be very interested in returning to New York. I think so too. We discussed it on the pod. I don't know if it was December or January or February, sometime in the winter. He's speaking with Knicks reporters. He basically said, "I didn't handle it well." Kind of apologized for the way that it was all handled. I think,
but it's so funny because like how many of those same Knicks beat writers talked about how it was all the Knicks' fault and how they handled things, and KP was perfectly fine. He did nothing wrong, And then he's telling those same writers, "Hey, I didn't handle that well. I'm sorry."
Exactly. And everyone was convinced that KP was the next Kareem and combined. That said, obviously, let bygones be bygones. You're not going to cut up your nose to spite your face. There's a new regime in place. Again, if he was a free agent, so that's kind of where you start. If he's a free agent, would you sign him for, let's say he wants $35 million a year? I'd be hesitant. If he wanted to settle for 27 to 29, I'm interested. I definitely want to hear from him. But if he's asking for even 33, and I got to give up Mitchell Robinson and a draft pick for the right to pay an injury-prone big man that much money, I'm not saying I'm not gonna dismiss it outright. I think there's a place if he's, again, he needs to play the 5, which is something he wasn't willing to do during his first in New York, which rubbed the front office the wrong way and led to some of the friction. But it seems like he's been content. He understands that he has to play the center now. Not nearly the defender he once was when he came up and could stay in front of guys on the perimeter. Obviously, the biggest concern with committing significant $100+ million to that player is whether he's going to be healthy or not. I think you almost have to assume he's going to miss 20+ games a season. Is he going to be healthy in time for the playoffs? Those are all questions to be asked. Again, I think for the right price, in the right trade package, I definitely would consider it. Because he'd be foolish not to. He's a guy that is capable of putting up 20, 10, and 3 threes and 2 blocks every single time. I just think would the juice be worth the squeeze? I would be hesitant to kind of go that route.
Yeah, this is another tricky one to me because so much of it I think lies in how much are you paying him? Because I think there's a great chance that he would be the highest paid Knick if the Knicks somehow pulled the deal for him. Given the deal Brunson has, and given the deal Randall has, you're talking about the annual money they make. RJ Barrett, the deal he just signed. There's a great chance that he could demand more and could get more on the open market. So I think he should be the highest paid player on the Knicks, given he would be the third option at best, the third option probably. I don't know about that. Sometimes that kind of stuff doesn't matter so much if you're talking about just building the best team, but it is something to consider, especially when you take of part B, which is the health, which is how. Basically, I got to bank on how healthy I think Mitchell Robinson is going to be compared to Kristaps Porziņģis. And am I willing to pay Kristaps Porziņģis double what Mitchell Robinson is making now, not knowing if it'll be more healthy than Mitchell Robinson?
Right.
So it's a tricky thing. I think the Knicks would I think become a borderline great offensive starting lineup if they put Kristaps Porziņģis in the starting lineup. I mean, like it will make teams very difficult to match with them, because of Porziņģis' ability to stretch the floor. He brings you similar vertical, alley threat, lob threat player that Mitchell Robinson already is. So if you add to the starting lineup, the Knicks become, I know they were like the 3rd rated offensive rating team in the NBA. A lot of that due to the offensive rebounding. I don't think they would really lose much, despite not getting any of that offensive rebounding from Kristaps Porziņģis that you get from Mitch. I think that they would still be a really good offensive team. The question just becomes the health and how reliable can he be given the money I'm paying him, the commitment, which is why I think those words Bagley uses, long-term deal and significant commitment, are the words he keeps using. I think that this is something the Knicks have probably parsed through in-house, and they've thought, could we bring back Porziņģis for just next year and see how it goes? And maybe that's not something he's interested in. And then you say, okay, well, what does a long-term deal look like? And they're looking at those numbers and saying, we can't pay that given his health and also B, what you may give up. Because even beyond Mitch, I mean, what else would Washington want? I mean, if you're talking about just Fournier, then okay, I don't care as much. But I mean, do they want Obi Toppin? Do they want Quentin Grimes? Do they want any of those guys? Like, those are guys I would not trade for Kristaps Porziņģis either. I would not packaging them with Mitch. Like, to me, if I'm trading KP, Mitch is the centerpiece of a deal. You're getting scraps after that. If they're trying to get more young players out of the Knicks, then that's where I think you'd walk away. So I think I read this report from Bagley and thinking the Knicks they've went through this. I think that they've probably explored it. They probably thought that they also would make an interesting fit there. I think that's probably why Porziņģis was saying what he was saying. These teams, like, this stuff is decided like months before things actually happen. It's very rare. It's like the day of a guy says, you know what, I want to go to this team, and then a deal gets signed or a trade happens. This stuff that's all in the works. I think this stuff has been in the works. I think KP was talking about that stuff. And Nick saw what he was saying Probably talk to his representatives and say, hey, how would this work? Probably talk to Washington and say, what would you want? And they've decided that no hard feelings, but I just don't think it's going to work out. And given all of these situations and all the hurdles, I kind of understand that.
So a couple things. A lot of people, and this is something I'm going to harp on during these podcasts all summer. A lot of people have said the Knicks need to improve their three-point shooting. And they're right. Let's make no mistake. Knicks ranked 15th in three-pointers made, one of only 2 teams in the postseason to average less than 10 made three-pointers per game. They ranked 15th out of the 16 teams that qualify for the playoffs. But also keep in mind, the Knicks ranked 3rd in the NBA in offensive efficiency this past season. Right. They were tied with the Sixers, only 2 teams ahead of them in terms of offensive efficiency. They ranked 19th in defensive efficiency. They were, they were behind the Charlotte Hornets. They were just ahead of the Orlando Magic. These are not good teams, and this is where the Knicks, finished the season. 82 game sample size here in terms of defensive efficiency. So I think in trading away your best interior defender is a risky proposition at best. And the other thing in regards to Mitch's contract, really important to point out that he is like Jalen Brunson, has a descending value on his contract. So he made $17 million last year, going to make 15.6 in 2023-24, 14.3 the following season. By 2025-26, the final year of his deal, he's going to make $12.9 million.
That's a mid-level exception.
That's the same level as a mid-level exception for a starting caliber point guard, best offensive rebounder, center, best offensive rebounder in the NBA. That's a valuable contract. And you mentioned twice as much as KP. KP's new contract will be 3 times as much. Let's assume it starts at 30, would be 34 or 35 or 38, whatever, depending on how they structure it. So are you willing to pay 3 times as much for Porziņģis when you already have really talented scorers in Brunson and Randall, assuming that you're going to keep that as the core? So for those reasons, again, I think the right place and the right time. I like the idea of bringing back KP. I like the idea of him kind of a resurgence in New York. I didn't like the way it ended. I don't think anyone liked the way it ended. I thought it was really cool the way he was embraced by the Knicks fandom, and everyone really
in Washington. Yeah, it was shocking in some degree.
Yeah. It was really it was a remarkable. You had that All-Star season. Looked like the sky was the limit. So it was unfortunate the way it played out. As we know now, it worked out in the Knicks' favor. But I unfortunately, just with the way that the roster's constructed, I don't see it. I see it as a clunky fit.
Yeah, that's why I think you got Ian Begley there saying that it's not a path that they go down at this time. The exact wording from Ian Begley. So we'll continue to follow if this KP situation becomes more of a thing, but as of right now, it doesn't sound like that's something that the Knicks are going to explore. Okay, so it is the offseason, and while it's often the time where we talk about players who are not on the Knicks, like we've done for most of this podcast, talking about the finals, talking about Chris Paul and Kristaps Porziņģis. I want to do a segment where we catch up with some of the Knicks that we have currently on the team as they enjoy this offseason. So first, Jalen Brunson was at Rucker Park last week representing the Knicks and the NBA Players Association to kick off summer basketball at the hallowed ground. Brunson said this about playing for the Knicks in his first season in New York.
There's no fan base better than the Knicks fan base, and just playing in Madison Square Garden, man, it's electric every single night, and especially during the playoffs. It takes us to a whole nother level. So it's the best place to do it.
So there, Brunson calling Madison Square Garden, playing for the Knicks, the best place to be. Meanwhile, Mitchell Robinson's having a good old time this offseason as well. He won Best Interior for his entry into the Atlantic City truck meet that happened this past weekend. He was also seen on video riding a mechanical bull, which was pretty crazy to see a 7'1" guy on a mechanical bull. But he seemed to be having a good old time, Mitch being the country boy himself. So congrats to Mitchell Robinson. I know how much he loves his trucks, winning Best Interior for his entry in the Atlantic City truck meet. And hasn't been all just fun and games this summer. Knicks also working on their game. So video shown of RJ Barrett working with the likes of Andrew Nembhard and Paul Reed working out in Orlando. Emmanuel Quickley, who ended his season injured. Remember, he injured his ankle in Miami against the Heat. Ironically, he's in Miami, which is where he normally works out He's posted a video of him working out, so he seems to be back healthy, I assume, on that front. So first on Brunson, him talking about being New York being the best place to be. Like, I thought this was interesting because the Knicks, for however many years, have been talking about trying to bring other stars. I'm not gonna say stars anymore because they have at least I would argue they have 2 stars now, but they definitely have like I said, a championship cornerstone now in Jalen Brunson. So now the talk's been about adding other stars to the collection that they have right now. Hearing Brunson talk about the Knicks, do you think that other players will look at Brunson as a guy who could be an effective recruiter to bring guys to New York? Will players look at what Brunson did in this postseason and say, you know what, that's a guy I want to play with?
I think so. Because players know better than anyone. Better than the media. If you notice, it wasn't current players that Jokic had played against that saying that Jokic was,
stat padding. That is very true.
That is very true, because they they're forced to acknowledge because they have to match up against these guys. So yeah, I think Brunson showing because the hardest thing to do is get over that. A lot of teams can make the postseason, but it's another thing to win a round. It's another thing to close out tough postseason games. And Brunson showed that he has the ability to do that. And there aren't that many players. And again, it's something we talked about during the Knicks postseason run. Really great players, and this is any sport, baseball, football. We'll use baseball as an example. They hit the same, they'll post a similar batting average in the postseason as they do in the regular season. Those are great postseason players because the pitching's better, the pressure's ratcheted up. So if you can match the stats on the back of your baseball card, look at Jeter's career numbers weren't exponentially better during the postseason than the regular season, but the fact that they were similar highlighted just how good Jeter was compared to his peers when the games mattered most. And that's what we had with Brunson. Again, 2 players this postseason. Miami's played the Bucks, the Celtics, the Knicks, the Nuggets. 2 players averaged more than 30 points per game against Miami. Nikola Jokic and Jalen Brunson. So that speaks to just how they've shut down everybody. So I say that to say Brunson's emergence this regular season, and then more importantly in the postseason, was not lost on important players. And as we talked about a couple weeks ago, him being named to the USA team, again, he'll get these kind of bona fides. He'll probably make the All-Star team next year, maybe make an All-NBA team, which may or may not work in the Knicks' favor. Something to keep an eye on as we look 2 years ahead towards his free agency would mean the Knicks would be eligible for the Supermax. Story for another day. But again, as the national recognition grows, that'll play a part. But again, players know that if you have a team with Jalen Brunson, if you consider yourself a star, that's why when we talked about the Embiid situation, like in any other scenario in the past, I'd be really hesitant to roll the dice on a guy like Embiid, to give up the farm and pay him a ton of money for a player like Embiid. But windows relatively small, where you have Brunson on this cheap contract, so you can strike while the iron's hot, that type of thing. And I think those, for that reason, other players recognize as well that Brunson's the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA can be really cliquey at times, and a lot of it can be, your exposure to certain guys and kind of where they are in their careers. I think Jalen Brunson could be seen now as a budding star in this league, maybe a budding superstar in this league, given what he did in the postseason, because that is the biggest stage we have in basketball. Like, it's part of the reason why Randall being a number 1 I thought was ever going to work, because he is not that great in the postseason. And that's the most people are going to see from him. It doesn't matter if he's having 25 and 10 in the regular season. People are going to see, okay, what's happening in the postseason? And we've now seen twice him struggle. Like, Brunson being the face and the ambassador for what the Knicks are trying to build has a lot more credence because they see this guy's a dog. Like anybody who watched and paid attention to the postseason, which is everybody who follows basketball, because this is when everybody's paying attention, who maybe weren't paying attention to the Knicks as much during the regular season, saw that this guy was not just playing okay. This guy was playing at an even higher level that he was in the regular season, and during the regular season, he was having a great year. So you look at that and say, wow, that the Knicks got really something going with this Jalen Brunson guy. So I think the fact that he can speak to the Garden being a great place to play, I think is also important. Like, I don't think that Julius Randle also could ever speak about the Knicks fans and MSG and Madison Square Garden being great, because I don't think he loves playing there. I think he likes playing for Tom Thibodeau. I think he likes playing under Leon Rose and Worldwide West. I think he likes living in New York. But we know his relationship with the fans is frosty. Some of it on him, some of it also on some of these idiotic fans who are doing stuff like writing on his name on outside of the Garden, whatever. So I like Brunson being that guy is important because I think that he's got carte blanche with the fans. He's embraced Madison Square Garden. He's embraced the city, and he has the credentials now, the postseason credentials to stand up and speak about what it is to be a Knick and how special it is. And I think that he can be an effective recruiter for the Knicks. So I think that that's an important thing for the Knicks that happened this year, that Brunson stepped up the way he did.
Yeah, no doubt. He's emerged as the face of the franchise, and that's really, really important. And it was JJ Redick actually on his podcast talked about Jokic is the ideal kind of face of the franchise leader, locker room leader, because he's so unselfish and only cares about winning and doesn't care. He said, if you want to give it the MVP, give it the MVP. I want to win the championship. And some people have knocked him. He doesn't care enough about stuff to get multiple interviews and talk trash on the internet, like yada, yada, yada. Smart front offices, smart coaching staff. We talked about heat culture. Those, you want somebody who, when you step in between the lines, plays the right way, and says the right things off the court. Doesn't make headlines for headline's sake. And that's what the Knicks have in Brunson, which is in addition to his, skills on the court, is just as important when you talk about a guy that's going to be the face of a really important franchise in the league.
So we got RJ getting working in Orlando. We got IQ getting working in Miami. What are some things you want to see both of those guys work on coming into this next season with them? RJ in year 4, Emmanuel quickly in year 3, I believe, or is that 4 and 5?
Yeah, but Barrett 5, IQ.
Barrett 5, IQ 4. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it sounds simple, but RJ just needs to become a more efficient shooter. That's obviously whether that's tweaking his mechanics to become a more effective 3-point shooter or getting to spots on the floor that he's only taking uncontested threes as opposed to 4 shots. Becoming a better finisher. Unfortunately, a lot of the same stuff we talked about 12 months ago that RJ would need to work on that we didn't see in the 2022-23 regular season, but then saw for a stretch there when he played by far the best basketball of his career, starting game 3 of that Cavs series to game 5 of that Miami series. That was an 8-game stretch where he averaged 22, 5 and 3, and I think slashed 49, 38, 74, somewhere in those kind of parameters and that was the ceiling for RJ Barrett. So it's really an interesting player. I wrote a post today about a potential trade for OG Anunoby that would involve RJ Barrett, and the response has been outrageously about how I'm an idiot and how RJ's great and you can't give up on a player. Meanwhile, they're saying RJ does everything better than OG, even though OG's a second-team all defensive player. But that's neither here nor there. Love Knicks Twitter, but they won't be the first fan base to base their reactions solely. How can a guy be valuable? He only averages 16 points. He can't be that good. So, whereas RJ averages more, even though when you look at their shot attempts and yada yada yada. But RJ can be obviously has plenty of areas for improvement. Basically, watch tape of what he did to succeed in the postseason. But again, part of that was due to the fact of game plan scheming, where the Heat basically dared him. They said, "We're not going to beat up. We're not going to." Brunson beat us. So and RJ took advantage, stepped in and stepped up as well he should. So can he continue kind of on that momentum going forward?
Yeah, I mean, with RJ, I echo those sentiments. Like I'm watching these clips, and I'm looking to see if Drew Hanlen's anywhere to be found, and I'm not even sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing if Drew Hanlen's anywhere to be found, because he has been his shooting coach for his entire career, even dating back to Duke, I believe, and we've seen RJ be a very, at best, inconsistent shooter. So. And there were no jump shots being done in those clips, by the way, also, which was not alarming. Obviously, this is a 10-second clip. But I'm like, all right, I want to see, is he improving this shot? Because that to me is the thing that he needs to improve on. And even particularly, because I think maybe it's a bad assumption, but I assume a lot of guys get up, a certain amount of threes and uncontested threes during their workouts or during the offseason. I really think RJ needs to, like I've said, I would lock him in a gym with Jimmy Butler and make him just copy and paste Jimmy Butler's game to his game. I think they have similar body types. They have similar strengths. And if RJ could get a mid-range game, a reliable mid-range game, because to me, like Barrett is he's not a competent shooter with any kind of contest on his shots. So like Butler's so great in the mid-range because he can shoot over smaller guys. He can shoot contested shots in the mid-range. And to me, Barrett, in the best shooting season he had, which was the second year, he incorporated the mid-range game into his game. It's just disappeared since then. So I want to see him get back to that mid-range game. So I think that would be important. And then for Emmanuel Quickley, I want to see Emmanuel Quickley. I don't know if so much for him it's necessarily something to work on. You ain't gonna work on everything, but he improved so much. But I think continuing to kind of fill out still, continuing to get stronger. I thought in the playoffs he looked weak. And I don't mean weak as in like he's a weak player, but I just thought that Cleveland was able to kind of just, put like a bigger guy like Harris LeVert on him and kind of just push him around and bully him around. And in Miami, we know how they play, kind of same thing. Put some bigger guys on him, bully them around, push him around. And he just never seemed to get into a rhythm. And it was interesting that the thing we saw him doing was strength work, was the picture that was posted. So I think that may be the biggest thing for him is just continue to work on the body, continue to work on the conditioning. Like he did a great job of that last season. I think he can continue to get stronger, continue to get bigger, and be ready to face that playoff physicality next go around. I think that he'll be in great shape. And finally, what do you think of Mitchell Robinson's rodeo skills? Again, you got a 7'1" guy riding on a mechanical bull, not something I've ever seen before. What do you rate him out of 10 on the mechanical bull riding from Mitchell Robinson?
I think it's I'd give him a solid. I'll do this. I'll say his I'll give him the same grade as his free throw percentage this season. So that's below 50, below 5. Let's go with that.
Yeah, he wasn't that graceful going down, which, surprise. Mitchell Robinson not being graceful going down. We see that during basketball games too. Luckily, he's not landing on hardwood. He's landing on obviously a lot of cushioning. But it's good to see Mitchell Robinson enjoying himself because he seems like a fun guy, but he seems to also take like things very hard. Like we saw oftentimes, I'm not getting the ball enough, going to Snapchat. So like I actually like to see when Mitch is like kind of like having fun because sometimes it seems like a guy who can quickly kind of like not fly off the handle, but can quickly kind of get a little angry and let that be known. So I thought it was good to see Mitch Robinson in that light. And shout out to his truck. I mean, I saw the interior of the truck; it was looking nice. I follow Mitch. I follow all these guys on the Knicks, and I've seen his plethora of trucks, and he's got the big wheels on him. And I don't know. I guess I'm assuming he's living upstate. I don't know if he's able to get those things over to New York. I mean, he got them to Atlantic City, so I guess he probably does have some of them in New York. I've seen him riding them in Louisiana. He's a big country boy. There's no doubt about that. So shout out to Mitch Robinson for the best interior award, and shout out to him on the let's say so-so mechanical bull riding efforts there.
Yes, but work on your free throws, Mitch.
Yes, please.
Need to work on. Put up on your tippy toes, a little bit of arc on the ball. Let's. I don't even care if he misses free throws next season. I just want to see, as long as the ball has a chance to go in by going above the rim at any point in the shots arc, I'll be happy. I'll consider that success.
It is wild to watch Nikola Jokic play and see like how many times the ball hits the rim and goes in because of how much of a soft touch he shoots with.
Amazing.
And then you see Mitchell Robinson shoot free throws, and it's just like, I mean, it's like a missile. It's like a missile right to the basket. I mean, you think he's gonna break the rim if he doesn't get the ball over the rim because of how hard he's shooting the ball. So yes, Mitch, please definitely work on those free throws as well. That's a good place to leave it, though. So I want to thank you guys for checking out this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast, Audacy, WFAN original. Of course, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. Also, check us out on YouTube. You can find us on the Audacy Sports channel and the WFAN channel. Make sure you subscribe there. Leave us a comment in your video and under the video, and give us a like as well while you're at it. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter, and subscribe to that What's on Tap newsletter for the aforementioned trade discussion.
Definitely subscribe to the newsletter. You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you guys again so much for checking this out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.